Everyone, looks like we are about to get started here in just a second. So I'd like to thank you for joining us here at the International Water Resources Association webinar on women and resilience in the water sector. We're having a really great panel here for you today, but we're having just a little trouble getting a few of them connected. So that is what we're working on right now. If you could just give us 1 or 2 seconds, we're going ahead and get all that taken care of. And we are going to get started in just 1 or 2 minutes. So thank you so much for your help. We will be happy to have it started in just a minute. All right, let me just get my last couple speakers connected. Lisha, have you heard from Helen? Alicia, I can't hear you with the microphone there. I'll remind my Nisheti and her assistant, please don't click the end webinar button. Don't, I think it's at the top there or something. You don't want to click that.
Am I fine now?
Okay, sorry.
There we go.
Oh,
I think this looks good. This looks fine. Everything looks good, Nisheti and Nisheti's assistant.
Okay.
This looks fine.
Okay.
So, sorry, sir. What we need to know is how do we share the presentation from our side?
That's a good question. When it's your turn to present, I'll make you a presenter. It'll give you the opportunity to share your screen, and then you can you'll present directly from your computer. So you just put the PowerPoint right there on your computer, and then you advance the slides yourself. Very simple.
Oh, okay.
No one's ever had problems.
Okay, sure, no problem. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, I think it should be great.
Thank you so much.
Lisa, have you heard from Helen? Katsum is sending me some messages. She can't connect.
Basically, he's saying, hopefully, you don't do your time. He will make you the presenter. Once you're the presenter, then it gives you everything. Then you can then share with them.
So where is it loaded? How do you load it now?
At that time, as he's saying, at that time, it gives you those options. Currently, you do not have those options.
Oh, so at that time, we will go to the desktop.
Yeah.
Because save it. Okay.
Then when on your side, you're going to be presenting.
Okay, everyone. Well, I think that we are here top of the hour, and we're 12 minutes past. So we are excited to have so many people with us here today. Really quite a huge turnout for this really important issue. So we would like to welcome you to the International Water Resources Association webinar on women and resilience in the water sector. And our panelists should include Katsum Atagora, chair of the Network of Women Professionals at Net Water, Helen Natsu, regional manager of the Nile Basin Discourse, Maureen Nisheti, chief director of the Global Cooperation Department of Water and Sanitation of South Africa, and Lisha Whitmere, executive director, Women for Water. As you probably all know, this is a webinar hosted by the International Water Resources Association. IWRA is an international network of researchers and practitioners who work on a multidisciplinary range of water resource issues. We are a nonprofit, non-governmental educational organization, and the IWRA provides a global knowledge-based forum for bridging disciplines and geographies by connecting professionals, students, individuals, corporations, and institutions who are all concerned with the sustainable use of the world's water resources. We even have our own groups who are focused on important task force and issues, and we're hoping that issues like gender and women's representation of water can be pushed to the forefront. We're really happy to have you all here today, and thank everyone for tuning in. We have a great panel, some of whom are still connecting, but hopefully everyone will make it in today. But these are all practitioners and researchers who have been active in the field for many years and have a real stature in the field. So both our webinars are very academic focused, and today's is much more practitioner focused. So this will be very interesting for us and hopefully interesting for you as well. I think that a lot of you know that our panel here today will talk about the gendered aspects and the important role of women in resilience in the water sector. The links between water and women are becoming increasingly well researched, but they're not always being pushed forward to the front of the world's agenda. Now, in particular, we're looking at questions, for example, the lowered rates of resilience for women and girls due to inadequate sanitation and how that falls harder on them. And this is an issue that is magnified in low-income areas, particularly rural areas, where women who are often in charge of water collection and the sources are very distant. This can take up significant amount of time and energy in their day. And also in places where issues like sanitation, toilets are absent, they don't exist, or they're just not secure or private. So today, the webinar will look at the role that women can play in building and strengthening resilience in water management and governance. This is an issue that's much more important as we have population growth and climate change puts a strain on water resources. So just to let you, I think many of you have probably been to some of our webinars before, but just to briefly explain the format of today's webinar, it's going to be just a little different than we're used to, perhaps. So to start, each of our panelists will have a short presentation of 10 to 15 minutes, and at the end we'll have time for audience questions. So if you have a question at any point, please you'll see there on the side of your GoToWebinar control panel, about halfway down it says questions, and you just type that and it'll come right to me, and then when it's the time for the questions, I'll distribute them to our panel. But don't wait till the end. Please send the questions in right now, if you like. If you think of anything, as the panel is speaking, just go ahead and send it. And of course, please try to keep the questions engaging and interesting for everyone. If it's a small issue which you want to learn more about and really engage with one of our panelists, don't feel shy. That they're all available on the internet. So please feel free that you can interact with them. And it's just a reminder, we're going to have recordings of the webinar as well as the slides, and hopefully if there's some leftover questions that we are unable to get to, we'll have the opportunity to have those addressed by our panelists as well. So yeah, wonderful. Helen has just arrived. Helen, it's good to have you with us here today. Okay, so with that in mind, I think it's time that we get started, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Leisha. Leisha, I see you just reconnected. Leisha Whitmere. Leisha, are you with us? And can we? I'm making you the presenter. Leisha, we can't hear you or see you. You were just. We just had a good conversation for an hour before. Okay, we cannot hear you, Leisha. We can see your camera. No, we can see your screen. So just open up the PowerPoint there. PowerPoint there at the bottom. Leisha, are you with us? Leisha, can you hear me? Let me just send Leisha a quick message here. Already got a question coming in. This is great. Thank you, Pam. Okay, Leisha, maybe the most expedient way here would be Nishedi. Nishedi, you can hear me, correct? Okay. Okay, there you go. Nishedi, how about we make you a presenter, and you can present, and we'll get Alicia reconnected here. You'll see it says share my screen on your screen.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. Click that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Just go to the top, your first slide there.
Okay.
Ask them if they can see it.
Yeah, we can just see your screen perfectly. Just go to your first slide there.
Will do. Okay. Thank
Okay,
you very much.
Make it a full screen if you can.
Oh, okay. Is it fine? Excuse me. I'm fine. I can. Can I start presenting?
Yes. Yeah. Just try to make it full screen. Can you make it full screen?
Full screen. Full screen.
Hi, what do you make it full screen?
Down there at the bottom.
Down at the bottom.
Yeah, right there. Right to right at the bottom. Go take your mouse down a little bit further. You'll see right there on the down a little further.
Yeah.
At the bottom of the screen, you should see it looks like there's about 3 different ways to present it. No, I think you want to go one over to the left. There you go. That's perfect. Just go to the top first page.
Okay. Thank you very much. And
thank you. It's good.
I just want to introduce myself as Nchedi Muripe from the Department of Water and Sanitation, South Africa. I'm the Chief Director responsible for global cooperation and special programs. My presentation today is going to take what the key theme is, but I would want us to zoom in a bit into what the challenges are, because I feel strong that we always talk about the same thing, but we don't actually get to see what the challenge is and why do we still get the same challenges. I would want to start my presentation by asking a question. What is the actual problem that we have? Do we have such policies that seek to actually achieve resilience for women in the water sector? Are there systems in place to support the implementation of such policies? Do we have political will to ensure implementation of such? Or do we have women who qualify to fit in? We will then have to answer those questions ourselves as women organizations, as governments, as interest groups that seek to support women. The other issue that comes to my mind as I do the presentation is, what do we know from what we've been saying throughout the years as women that actually must be what should support the progression or the implementation of the policies that we are talking about? The question is, we know that there are policies in place at national level in many countries. Yes, we do know that we have strong multilateral organizations, but not enough support or no resources and platforms to monitor those. And we know that there is no obligatory systems in place to support implementation of such policies. Yes, many countries do have political will, like South Africa, we do have. All of you would know that our president doesn't skip a presentation or any other platform that he uses to talk about how women should be supported and the development of women, including the empowerment of women in the country. And we know that we do have women leaders in South Africa. But what is the actual challenge there? We will need to come up with the answers ourselves. And yes, we do know that we have a lot of women, many women who qualify or fit into the system that we want to achieve, or the development of women as we want to achieve them. Now, the big question that comes is that, what is the missing link from what I've asked and from the questions that I responded to say, according to me, we do have all that it takes for us to achieve what we want to achieve. Is the missing link our own power as women? Is the missing link the political or social landscape in our countries? Or do we know what policies and legislation should do for women in the water sector for us to progress? I do not know as to whether all of us do know what our legislations or our policies do say for us to achieve what we want to achieve. I just want to give a slide here that talks to what the South African legislation say in terms of the water and sanitation objectives that government should achieve for us to, not necessarily as women, but as a country, where you should be able to point out as to whether you think women are not actually catered for. According to me, they are catered for. You will hear from the bullets as I read through, because according to the objectives of our country's water sector legislation, we are doing this using water for promoting socio-economic developmental agenda. That's what they should be achieving. Reducing inequality, which caters for women. Leveraging additional investments for infrastructure development, which will actually cater for women, including women in the rural areas and in the informal sectors. Enabling rural communities to use water for rural livelihoods. That's what we want to achieve, because we want our women in the rural areas and everywhere to also be able to use water or to have clean water for the rural livelihoods. Promoting greater citizen participation in decision making. That's the key or core of what women should be looking for in their policies, because they are all citizens of their countries, and therefore they have to be part of the decision making agenda of their own countries. And allowing for innovation and knowledge. Women has got a lot of knowledge, including indigenous knowledge that we are using. Women are busy surviving without clean water because they are using their innovative knowledge and indigenous knowledge. The next slide that I'm going to go into is women in the current situation of the COVID-19 pandemic. We are now in a situation where women should raise their hands and say, this is where we are, and this is what we knew all the time, that WASH is said to be the first line of defense in the absence of a vaccine now during COVID-19. We know that all women, whether in the rural areas, whether you do have clean water, whether you have infrastructure, you will make sure that your kids has got water, your family has got water. In whichever way you can achieve getting that water, you will do that. Therefore, this is the time women should be seen as the forefront runners in trying to fight this pandemic. And they are currently the ones who are in the households taking care of that as the first arrow then. In the health sector, they are frontliners as nurses. They are the ones who are running the unpaid labor care in their own homes, even in the community care services. They are the ones who are carrying water from long distances in the rural areas to make sure that everyone has got water to wash their hands as per what we are required to do during this time of the pandemic. And they are the ones actually who should participate in the change management and information and counseling of communities, as we know that women are natural leaders and they are the natural counselors in our communities, particularly in the rural areas, in the absence of the formal nursing communities and all the social workers that we have in the urban areas. And at the end of it, I'm saying women should be the ones informing policy and decision making based on the lessons that we are learning now during this pandemic. Almost the last slide, I would say that we've got reports, we've got researches that were made in the past. The first one that we can talk about is the global status reports of 2019, where research gives all the available information on what needs to be done. We've got the UN Water Global Assessment and Analysis of Sanitation and Water Drinking Water Report. That also gives us information of what needs to be done. But then the question is, who takes up the recommendation that comes out of these reports? And we've got the World Bank 2019 report on women in water utilities. And it showed that there's underrepresentation and there are barriers that includes policies and environment, work environments and all of that. At the end of this slide, I would want to say implementation, monitoring and evaluation is very key for us to achieve what we have to achieve for our women. And at the end, the reflections should be done by ourselves. We need to have scorecards where we can ensure that effective women and resilience in the water sector is achieved, and how are we doing at all levels, and what should we do next. That which should be with stakeholder perspectives, financial perspective, developmental and environmental perspective, learning and growth. Those can be done by all of what I've put on the site. You can read those for yourself. Revisit women's engagement with government politics, politicians and multilateral organizations. We need to revisit how we start with them and ensure that funding for women's empowerment as one of the is done. And allow women to participate in the river system. There's interference. I don't know if I should be continuing.
Please do. Trying to mute the microphones that aren't yours. Please continue.
So can I take off the presentation?
Do nothing.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I thought that was a really great presentation, and I enjoyed the way that you really were able to focus on the importance of putting women first in the water governance and the water sector. It's not something that maybe will be, I don't say handed, but something that almost needs to be demanded, something that women need to be actively involved in. And I thought that was a really great message to take away from your presentation. Now, our next speaker is, should be Lisha. Lisha, I don't know if you're able to connect with us. Lisha, are you there? If not,
I will call Lisha and find out what's happening.
okay. Helen, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. I don't know. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can. I'm going to make you the presenter, and it would be great if we can hear your presentation.
Okay. Now I have to see how I can share my screen.
I just sent you the link. Now you should be able to just click it there, and it says share my screen. So you just click that, and it should show your screen.
Okay. Where is the link? This one show my screen. I click here. Okay, I have clicked there. Then it will my screen will now come.
Perfect. Very good. Now just at the bottom, you can see there to make your screen full screen. Just to make it fill the whole screen there.
Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, I can. It looks great. Very good presentation.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Can you make it fill up the whole screen there, if you could?
I make it full screen?
Yeah, just make it, at the bottom
okay.
there, at the bottom, you'll see a thing to click to make the presentation fill the whole screen.
I click where show screen, or I just make it full PowerPoint.
Yeah, exactly. We don't need to see all the pieces of PowerPoint, file and all that stuff. There you go. That's beautiful.
Thank you
The
so much.
floor is yours.
Yeah?
Yes.
Yes. I wanted to look at this discussion from a different perspective. I just wanted to bring in the angle of a basin-wide organization and bring out the issues where women are quite important, so that I contribute to this discussion a little bit differently. So I'm looking at women and resilience in the water sector, and I'm looking at the perspective of a basin-wide organization. Now, the basin-wide organization that I have in mind is my own, because then I'm comfortable to talk about it, and that is the Nile Basin Discourse. This organization is an independent voice of grassroots people. It links communities in countries along the Nile with 625 civil society organizations in the 10 countries of the Nile Basin. And it connects these people to the governments and intergovernmental organizations, enriching boundary projects, programs, and policies. And we can say that the 50% of these people are women. Now, I would like to bring in the issue of women in social and climate resilience that this organization has been looking at. It has been engaging in civil society for social and climate resilience, that is basin-wide, and facilitating capacity building for the communities and women as climate resilience champions. Another key point that has been at the core of this climate resilience is empowering the women for proactive mindset, focusing on entrepreneurial behaviors involved in climate resilience. Another element that I would like to bring to this discussion is women in communities for change. This has come up because of what is happening in the wetlands. And therefore, this basin-wide organization has looked at women and water in communities for change in the wetlands of Lake Victoria and the Mara River Basin, but it will expand to other wetlands in the 10 countries. Now, the core of this is peer-to-peer women learning caravans on wash activities in the wetlands. This is a very interesting aspect.
I have audio for whatever reason.
You are not hearing? Hello?
I now have audio. I just restarted the whole thing.
Excellent, good.
So let's see where it goes.
Great. Okay, Lisha, we're gonna slot you into the third speaker now, and we'll just finish Helen's, and then we'll go to you. Okay?
Yeah. So may I continue?
Please continue, Helen.
Yes. A core element here is the peer-to-peer women learning caravan on wash activities in the wetlands. This has been very interesting because the women, once the first group is taught on these wash activities, then the women teach themselves on how to undertake wash activities. And this is quite pertinent in the wetlands. Another element I would like to bring to this discussion is women in transboundary shared waters. For the last 5 years, this organization has focused on 3 transboundary shared waters, the Barrow Sobat, the Nimuru Aswa, and the Lakes Edward Albert shared basins. And they have done 2 things. Okay, they have done more, but 2 things are key. One is the dialogue platforms on investments, climate, food security, and migration, which is very common between South Sudan and Uganda. And engaging women in watershed management and integrated water resource management in these key basins, and also bringing in the upstream protection and improving underground water. Now, this is communicated vertically and horizontally in 2 pipelines of communication by this organization, so the information can reach the decision makers and also the groups at the grassroots. And now, during these 5 years, it has been found that women in leadership are very minor. They are not as prominent as male heads of organizations. Although this organization in 2015 set up the 10 countries in 3 clusters, where Egypt, Ethiopia, South Sudan and Sudan were cluster 1, headed by a woman, and Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania headed by a woman, and Rwanda, Burundi, and DR Congo headed by a woman. It was still found that women are only powerful in Sudan. The rest of the countries, the percentages are below 30. And therefore, as a future, this organization has set up a basin-wide program for proactive women leadership, informed by findings of the stakeholder map in 2015 and findings at climate risk management and resilience capacity building platforms of those 3 years, and also lessons from the Women in Water Partnership, so that we can actually bring more women in leadership position. Another item that is coming up and has become very exciting for this organization is women in citizen data. Women that form over 50% of the population are at grassroots. Women are experiencing problems of climate risk. They are experiencing problems of wash. They are experiencing dam insecurity and also flood and droughts. They also suffer from watersheds, the landslides, and population growth. They have to feed the family, take care of the family, get the water.
You don't quite hear it. Helen, are you having an audio issue?
What did you say, Scott? I'm back, finally. This is Lesha.
Can we hear Helen? I don't hear her.
No, I can't hear Helen.
It's quite too bad. This was an excellent presentation. I was really enjoying this.
Programs and development.
She's
Hello?
back.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, we are again.
Yeah, we may have lost you there for about 2 or 3 minutes.
All right. This is quite important because this is quite vital because this organization works very closely with the Intergovernmental Organization for Investments and Developments in this basin, and also works with governments, and therefore would like to have an engendered contribution to position papers for policy discussions, programs, and project development. Now, when it comes to this COVID-19, this impact has quite been a challenge to us. Of course, most of us or our countries are now under lockdown and movement is a problem. Now, if we look at this organization, their focus is at grassroots. Therefore, that makes the implementation of activities a challenge. But then, of course, we all know that with challenges comes opportunities. So the organization is quickly replanning to more and more virtual activities that will be implemented now with deliverables that will lead to the overall deliverables in the future when the situation improves. However, a challenge for grassroots still exists at this moment. Now, in summary, I would like to say that for women in the Nile Basin, I think, in my own opinion, having been in the Nile Basin for over 20 years, there are 2 aspects. First, the proactive involvement of the women, and also the financial possibility for the women. Thank you very much.
That was such a good presentation. Thank you so much. You know, I really like how you finished there on the discussion about the opportunities that this COVID can provide. There's so much obvious and really important focus on the negative aspects, of course, but be able to kind of turn it there at the end there and say, well, what can this provide us in the future? What directions can we go? I thought that was really, really helpful. Thank you. But also, I like the way the discussion about it. Look at this at a pretty useful scale for a lot of people. The river basin is a scale that a lot of people understand, a lot of people organize around. So I think it was really good to get that kind of highlighted. Thank you so much. Lisha, can go to your presentation.
Yes, I'm back online.
She's back.
And yes, I'm back.
A bit of light
I
behind
had some
you.
really technical issues, but I don't know where they came from. So I will show my screen.
Mm-hmm.
and try to basically follow up on what Helen said, if it works. Not yet. Let me see.
Having some great questions come in, folks. So keep the questions coming in. That's really, really good.
Can you see my screen now?
We can. Just make sure it's full screen, just like we did earlier.
No, I'll make it full screen. Where are we? Here. Okay. That was okay. So what Helen was already saying, and I'm sorry I missed Maripe's presentation, is that it's a lot about coping mechanisms and whether we're actually using them or not. Just to give you quick background on Women for Water Partnership, this is who we are. A federation, 28 members, if you look at our website. But actually a lot of them are umbrella organizations. So there are loads and loads of other women's organizations attached to that. So in the end, we figure that we're actually representing about 1.5 million women across the globe. And my great friends, Kusum, but also Helen and others are part of that. And what is, I think, important to note that it's very diverse. So it's grassroots and it's academics. So every level of society is involved in there. And I think it's very important when we discuss the issue of women's coping mechanisms and women's resilience to remember that we have all these very, very different experiences and expertise there. So one of the things that, of course, is something that I also discussed with Scott offline, is that the world did a lot of very, very interesting stuff mainly in 1992. So they came up with the Dublin Principles. They came up with the CEDAW Convention and the Beijing Action Platform. They came up with the Rio environmental, the first Rio conference, and everybody was saying, okay, women play a central role. And then in a lot of cases, that's been translated into very nice gender mainstreaming strategies. But in actual fact, a lot of that is not showing on the ground. So a lot of it is still in the drawer in a policy document, but not going anywhere. So part of that, the problem is what people perceive as levels of participation. So in a lot of cases, they don't go beyond number 2, seeking advice. They might share some information, but usually not in a very understandable way. They might be seeking advice on a consultative level, but usually when everything else has been already decided. But the levels of 3 and 4 are hardly ever there. And that's a huge problem when it comes to translating, for instance, the experiences that women like Kusum and women like Helen have at the local level. They know exactly what should be done, but actually bringing women into common objectives and systematically bringing them in on decision making is not the case. So what's the issue? One of them is that women's participation, and especially the impact of their participation, is hardly receiving any attention. So in a lot of cases, the reports you see are how many women were in the meeting, how many people were actually aware of something, but nobody's actually looked at, okay, then if you bring in the women, what is the impact? And a lot of the stuff that women's organizations are doing is not acknowledged. So there is, we all know, a lot of activity going on the ground. But if women are, for instance, planting trees, nobody's saying that they're doing something for IWRM. If women are looking at different crops, nobody's saying they're doing something about food safety. So the labeling of their activities is like, oh, okay, they have a hobby. But it's not a hobby. It is serious stuff. Now, what also happens is that in a lot of the frameworks that we do have, gender mainstreaming issues, policies, it's like, okay, we have set our piece, we have said what was socially wanted, but in actual fact, it's not really helping the women that are doing all these activities on the ground. If you look at all the stuff that's now published on COVID-19, there you already see an example. The majority of that work, whether it's wash delivery or health practice or care, is done by women. And in most of the cases, it is unpaid or voluntary. It does not show up in the statistics, and it's not getting any recognition or acknowledgement. So why are we not doing that? Because it's not smart, is it? We're ignoring all this experience, all this capacity, and not showcasing it and not scaling it up. It's extremely difficult for women's organizations to actually get funding to do the work they're doing. Their ability to cope is extreme because they're on the ground, they know what the problem is, and they react. But it's not like people say, okay, this is wonderful, let's see how and when we can actually upscale, multiply this stuff that the women's organizations are doing. So, for the academics amongst us, there is research done, yes. Like Scott was saying in his introduction, there is more and more research done, but usually it's about women as victims. So the ones who are impacted, but not the ones that are acting. If there is research, that's usually focused on wash delivery, but not on transboundary cooperation, not on managing farms, not on sand mining, not on. So a lot of elements that have to do with water, where women play a big role, is not researched, it's not acknowledged, So in the end, there is very little information and research on the impact of women's participation. Now, Women for Water has found a few partners where we do joint research. One of them is on the impact, really the impact on women's participation. We've done the first phase of that, and we would love to continue. We're still looking for donors to actually create an evidence base for why it's so important to involve the women more, why it's so important to acknowledge whatever they're already doing. The research that does exist is mainly on a project basis, but the problem with that is that the samples are too small to be conclusive, or, and that's very interesting, it's from the private sector. So it's consultancy groups that have done a lot of research on the impact of women's participation on in management, on the board of governors, and they are very, very positive about it. But it's not there for public, government, and other organizations yet. So this is something that we really need to work on. Women for Water has and is a part of the UNESCO World Expert Working Group. So is Kusum, and they have developed a lot of indicators and tools to actually help us to figure out how to measure, how to acknowledge everything that the women are doing. There is a huge lack of sex desegregated data. Out of the 193 members of the UN, only 84 report on it, and then very limited. So there's a huge gap in that. Helen was already talking about women's involvement in transboundary water management. We did research on that together with IUCN. And we're currently doing new research with FAO on the role of women where it comes to water scarcity. So a few little problems on information. One of them is that reporting agencies like GMP and GLASS, who collect information on water and sanitation delivery, do collect disaggregated data, but then the system of reporting leads to the fact that this is not visible. So the result is that what they did collect does not influence decision making, which is really worrying, because you really want to get that type of information into the decision making processes. And I think Nishedi was also referring to that. So, and another thing that Helen was mentioning is we are always complaining about that we don't have enough data. So how do we incorporate citizens' data, women's data, into our monitoring systems? And of course, I do recognize that the level of reliability is different between what is done by qualified academics or by citizens. But if you have 1 million or 2 million or 3 million women sending you their data, there might be a small flaw in there somewhere, but you can't deny the trend that's in there. So we have to figure out how to use that better and how to help them to collect the data. There is a wonderful program conducted by UNESCO WOP that really developed methodologies and indicators to do this kind of thing. So there's a lack of data. We need a lot more data on not just on the numbers, but also on how this works out. If women are there, can they speak? If women are there, is it recorded? If women are there, are their advices taken into account? So it's both quantitative and qualitative data. There are an enormous amount of tools available in the world on gender designated data, sex designated data, but a lot of people tell us that they don't know that these tools exist. So we have to figure out a way on how to make them more accessible, knowledgeable to everybody that's working with this type of data, and to make sure that they reach the level where they can actually be used. So, having said that, and then my screen got stuck. Sorry about that. So, one thing is collect more data, including citizens' data, and figure out how to do that. One is to talk to statistical offices and official organizations, how to collect and analyze it. How do we get the knowledge that we do have and the tools that we do have to the project managers? And how do we get more evidence to make sure that the donors that give us ODA will actually make sure that the money reaches the women's organizations? So here I'll stop, and I'm happy to take any questions that you want. Thank you.
Well, I thought that was a great presentation, and I think it's really important to, one of the things I took there right there at the end was when you're saying, you know, who's doing the recording, who's doing the measuring, and who can, you know, have this material saved. And I think that's an important thing that we're doing here today, honestly. We're having a debate, we're having a discussion, we're raising some awareness around these issues, and we're recording it. And people often ask, you know, is this recorded? Will we be able to find this information in the future? And it will be. It'll be available on our website, www.iwra.org, shortly after the event, along with PDFs of PowerPoint presentations by our great panel here today. So, as you also mentioned, Alicia, there, you know, I think some of these I'm reviewing some of your questions, and I have to say these are some of the strongest questions we've ever had at a webinar. So please keep the questions coming. You'll see about halfway down on your GoToWebinar control panel, it says questions. If you just type the question in, I'll see it, and then when it's the appropriate time, when we finish all our presentations, I'll convey them out to our audience. But right now, these look like great questions. So I think we'll have a really good discussion. Our last speaker is Kusum. Thank you for waiting. You've been very patient. I'm going to make you the presenter, and you should see on your screen there it says share my screen. There you go. Now just make your PowerPoint full screen.
First open your PowerPoint and then go full screen,
Yes.
Kusum.
We see the whole screen now. Just open your PowerPoint, and we should be good. I see your microphone is turned on, but
So just open the PowerPoint you want to present. Just open it.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sounds
I
great.
can hear you. Open your PowerPoint and then click on full screen.
It is open.
Just open your PowerPoint like you would do normally.
Yeah, just open it right up. There you go.
Exactly. There you go. And then click on full screen presentation. Yes.
Oh, that looks good.
Underneath.
Yeah. Just go right there to the full screen.
All the way down on your right.
Yes.
Presentation.
There you go. You get it there? Do you see it there, right on the right
Like
side
you
there,
was, like,
on the bottom?
like you was open it when you're just doing a presentation in a room.
Yeah.
It's usually all the way down on the bottom on your right.
Okay, I think you got it there. Is it? Just at the bottom on the right there.
You see like a
like
little
you-
television screen.
Yeah, just like if you were going to any
Looks like a
conference.
television. Looks like a television. Yeah, yes.
I sense that it's working. Okay, look, I mean, it's fine if it doesn't fill the whole screen. I mean, it's not the end of the world. We can read your
Okay,
slides.
just get going.
One, two. Oh, there we go. There we go. A little bit of patience is always good. Here. Someone is suggesting, do you have two screens open? And this could be possibly the problem? Do you have two screens?
It's not responding.
Okay,
Sorry.
just present like it was. That was fine. That was quite good, to be honest. Yeah, no problem. No problem at all.
Just open your PowerPoint again, and then we'll use that.
Yeah, there we go.
Yes.
Sorry, but the computer is very, very slow.
And then
okay.
click on this little, on the right-hand side, on the bottom of your screen. Yes, that one. Click it. Click it.
I'm sorry, it's not opening. It's very, very slow.
Just go ahead and present. I think it
doesn't matter. Just get going.
Okay, can I start now?
Yes, please do.
Thank you very much, Scott and everyone, for coming and listening to me. And I just have to tell you that my comments are made in the context of 66 days of extreme lockdown, just coming out of it, in the eye of the COVID-19 storm, and against the background of the larger calamity, which is climate change. I think this has very clearly told us that what is it at stake for us who go into this situation called COVID-19, and how it is going to take away a lot of the gains that we have already made. As you know, that 66% of the women in the world work in the informal sector. And from what I see from sitting here, talking with with the communities I work with, talking with the people that talking is all that I can do, because right now we have only phone connections. And even those people in the communities, they have no reloads, so they cannot call me back. How does COVID-19 impact on women? For us, is a major situation. We have been talking about WASH, but COVID-19 puts an entirely different dimension on women's needs in this particular situation. Women's capacity, I think, for endurance is getting sorely tried, as I would show from some of the responses I have got from the community. And I really see no special effort during the support programs that we have, helping these women to get into some kind of recovery mode. We have been talking about WASH for years now, but COVID tells us if you want to stay safe, you have to wash your hands for 20 seconds and you have to use soap. But my problem is, for most of the communities that I work with, which is urban communities, urban marginalized communities, or the rural communities, where is the soap? Where is the water? So, as we have been walking and talking our way on WASH through the MDGs, now to the SDGs, I asked myself, and I had 66 days to think of this, is this current crisis going to make it a top global priority? Or is it something that will peter out along with the coronavirus? And if it is going to make it the global priority, I want to highlight the issue of investment, which we have been talking about, and I have particularly been talking about for quite a long time. Is it going to bring us the critical investment? I come with a community which has been told to provide 50 taps for 50 children in each school. Again, my question is, where is the investment? Where is the money coming from? For me, gender equity is the key to global success. And we have been saying again this, that we have to ensure the well-being of the half the population if we want to make it to the SDGs. The SDGs seem to have sort of fallen by the wayside now, but let's keep it, put it back in. Do we believe it? Do we think that it can be done? Or do we just, sit in our comfort zones and say, let's be diplomatic. We have got to mention the women. So at every presentation that we have, we say, oh, we forgot the women. Oh, yes, let's do a slide on the women. And when we go into the COVID-related issues of infection, access to water, the enormous unemployment it has created, the underemployment, the case of women in domestic abuse, and the unpaid labor that Lesha referred to. Again, Lesha presented, where is the data? Do we have, again, the money to data? We are talking about fiscal stimulus, but do we have a fiscal stimulus which takes into consideration the women's issues and takes into consideration especially the single female-headed families? Because the economic devastation for women is probably going to continue and be exacerbated well after the pandemic. I'd like to share this photo. This is a woman of a migrant worker from Delhi, walking with everything that she owns and treasures. She's having a long walk. They will have to walk probably 700 kilometers. Where is the water to support her? Where is the sanitation? And once she goes to her home village, do we have water and sanitation? I don't propose to read this, but I'd like to share because I know you're going to put the webinars, the slides on the online. These are two messages I have had from two communities, all of them talking about the enormous tragedies that these communities undergo. Livelihood security, food security, domestic violence, trafficking of women. It's all happening in the context of COVID. And it is something that we cannot simply say, look, there's nothing much that we can do. You know, we are all under lockdown as we were. You know, I think that, you know, we can use our constricted time, well, our lockdown time to build awareness, progressing towards advocacy, and finally to action once we are unlocked. Finally, I'd like to say, we are talking about the new normal. Are we going to be the old system painted over with some activities to say, oh yes, we need to do something for women? I see that COVID is marked increasingly, globally, by increased authoritarianism. How are women going to fare in this context? And media, I think that the media can play a very, very, I would say, constructive role in highlighting the issues. But media is not on women in water. It's not about women in lockdown who have no water to wash hands. It's about, I mean, we hear more about Dominic comings and goings than we hear about women who are walking to their villages in India with no water. But still, a crisis is a good time to start, to move out of our comfort zones, to plan a more inclusive and more supportive social contract, and thereby boosting the resilience which has to happen if we are ever to present solutions for climate change. Women in water sector, as we all know, we have had defeat after defeat trying to do something, but we keep fighting. So I hear everybody saying, oh, sadly, we have lost so many people today. And I said, don't get sad, get mad. Let's seize this day to present our awareness to the world, present our advocacy solutions, and work on towards action. Thank you.
Great,
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I like that that kind of ended there on a fiery note there. I agree with you. I feel like we've been learning about the comings and goings of certain people in England far too much, and not nearly enough discussion here about the importance issues of gender, water, and access that are much more important, right? I mean, we should not be focusing on that. All right, folks, now we have about 23 minutes, so we're going to quickly ask a poll question as we shift into the question and answer period. So our question here is, not the question I'm looking for. Here's the poll question I'm looking for. All right. Okay, so what will move women in water higher up on the international agenda? And we're looking at just kind of get your feedback from the audience. This has been always perpetually, perennially well responded to period of time in our webinars. So do people feel like it'd be more grassroots activism, better engagement from policymakers, more significant academic research, or pressure from other stakeholders? Very, looks like kind of a, well, I don't want to upset the democratic process, but it looks like there's a very neck and neck tie here. So we'll leave this open for about 1 more minute here as we also give an opportunity for you to answer your questions. And like I said, if we have the opportunity, I'll send these questions out to our panelists. If you don't have a chance to get them answered right now, I'll send them out to our panelists and see if they have a chance to get them answered for you later. And then we can post that on our website at www.iwra.org. So we appreciate all the questions that you have, and we see this as a really great opportunity to connect our members, particularly, but really anyone who's watching our webinars to these experts, whether or not they're academics or whether or not they're practitioners. We see ourselves as really serving this role of being able to sort of bridge between the public and people who have expert knowledge of the water issues. And then we see that as a webinar as a way to kind of do that, and we also see these, be able to get these audience questions and answered for you as a way to address that. So, okay, well, looks like better engagement with policymakers with 53% was the highest vote getter. So, very interesting. Half the people thought that we need to be better engaging with policymakers. I suppose the next time we can follow up and learn a little bit more about how that should happen, what kind of depth that would happen, what are maybe some best practices. All right. So what we'll do here is ask as many questions as we can, and I will let the panelists, I'll let you unmute your microphones. Please mute your microphones if you're not speaking, and if you wish to speak, unmute yourself. And I will just let you respond when you feel comfortable and ready if you have an answer, and don't wait for me to call on you at all. So. The first question, which was asked quite some time ago by Kentika Takar, was what is meant for you by resilience for women and girls? So what is really the underlying idea of resilience, and how can that play out in the policy field?
Yeah, this is Lesha. Well, resilience is a very broad concept, but what it comes down to is that you actually give people, and in this case women, access to coping mechanisms. I always remember one of the examples from Kusum, that when they had huge mudslides in Sri Lanka, the government was actually saying, get out of there. And they gave information. But what they didn't tell them is where to go and how they could protect their livelihoods, how they could secure their living. So they didn't have access to another coping mechanism. So that's definitely part of it. The other one is access to information. People keep saying, oh, we have the web, we have email and what have you. So everybody should have access to information. But in actual fact, only 42% of the world's population, women, have direct access to the web and mobile phones and everything else. So saying that you can solve everything by just sending it through the web and mobile phones is not going to work. If you want resilience, you need good communication stuff, you need access for them to actually be able to communicate, which at the moment is not the case. So resilience, yes, it's learning how to cope. It's being acknowledged if you give ideas on how to cope, that they're worthwhile and they're acknowledged and they're supported by their governments, by their local governments, national government, and not just telling them, oh, you have to get out of there, but make sure that they know what to do when things happen. That would be my comment.
May I also add what in my own thinking, I will borrow a little bit more on what Lesha has said and look at resilience as having relevant information at the right time in the context of the community that the women are living in, and being in a position to have a mind, proactive mind, that will lead to the fourth level of empowerment, whereby the woman is able to act, maybe and take some entrepreneurial activity, and that way they will be resilient to maybe climate change or whatever that is impacting on the woman.
Does anyone else have a thought?
I would say,
can I speak?
Moderator, if you allow me, I would say that the two last respondents were really correct, because for me, resilient in this instance would also mean sustainability. If we can sustain our movement as women, if we can sustain the leadership that we get when we get an opportunity and development to do that, we need to be able to sustain that through the test of time, and we must be able to ensure that what women think is correct to take over in life should actually be what is good for generations today and tomorrow. Therefore, for me, resilience will be more of something that can be sustained both by governments and women themselves, including communities. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to endorse what, hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go.
Yeah, I'd like to endorse what Lesha said about communication. Now, during this lockdown period, we could call our partners, but they couldn't get reloads, so they could not call back. So we were always calling them. And the second is that I'd like to think of resilience as physical resilience and mental resilience. I think physical resilience is what Lesha was talking, that you need to give the correct guidance, to give the correct directives, and of course the financial support. But mental resilience is something which comes through your own ideology, your community.
Oh, that's really interesting. That's a good point. There's different types of, yeah. Let's go on to the next question. I mean, we have so many good ones here. Let me try to pick out a good one. Someone asks, and I think this is touched on by several of our presenters, water women are often priorities with governments and other stakeholders, but what is forgotten is the need gender budgeting. We do not get money for the projects in action. How can we get money? How can we solve this? This comes from Marinette Verhoef-Cohen.
Wonderful question. This is Lesha. There are two sides to it. One is that organizations like Women for Water, but also I think the South African government and now Basin Discourse, but also a lot of our members are actively trying to promote gender responsive budgeting, which is a very concrete way of assessing whether money is actually reaching the different groups. In this case, it's not just the women, but it's also boys and girls and transgenders. But making sure that if you have a policy and you put a budget to it, that it actually does what you were hoping to do. And this mechanism is widely available. There are quite a lot of organizations that are very knowledgeable on the topic, but it would be really great if we could do that much more and make it part of the budget allocation, and whether that's the national government or the local government or an NGO to make sure that the money actually does help what your policy implies. So that's one part. And I would say, yes, there is a huge problem in the world in getting money to the women's organizations in this case. They are seen as, oh, they can't handle money, they don't know what they're doing, they don't have assets to make it possible. And this is a huge problem. I mean, the OECD, which keeps track of this kind of financing, estimated, and you're not going to believe this, but that the money from ODA, and then we're talking billions, only 0.05%, so not even 1%, is reaching women's organizations directly. So there is a big problem in the mechanism in how we allocate money to different activities. And that's a huge problem for women's organizations, because with all the work they're doing, they're hardly ever getting enough financing to keep doing what they're doing. And that's a big worry. And that's one of the asks from Women for Water. Can we please get all these wonderful minds together? Researchers, economists, government people, to figure out a system where we can actually make sure that money does reach these organizations to continue their work. Thanks, Scott.
No, thank you. Does anyone else want to comment, or should we go to the next question? Well, we can just jump to the next question. There's so many good ones here. This comes from Lisa Debrick. Given that we have Dublin Principle since 1992, and women's roles was deemed key from the start, why do you think we're making so little progress? And not denying the progress that has certainly been made. If you had to list one single reason for the continued challenges we face for women's participation in the water-related decision-making process, what would it be?
Can you slowly repeat the last part of that, Scott?
If you had to list one single reason for the continued challenges we faced for women's participation in the water-related decision-making process, what would that be? What is one single reason for the continued challenges we face for women's participation in water-related decision-making processes?
I don't think there's one particular issue. It's a sort of a constellation of issues which come together. It's difficult to say this is the reason.
In my case, I would rank moving the emerging issues to a higher level of participation, where we bring in, for example, leveraging on the platforms that we have the decision makers sit there and make decisions and then follow up on decisions. I think reaching that level has been one of the main challenges.
Does anyone else want to?
Nashedi, you are nodding. Go on.
Yeah, I think for me, really more than anything is to make the implementation of those policies that are there, because I don't think we can argue that there are no policies, there's no legislation that covers for that. And that's what I said in my presentation, but make it obligatory. Let us have obligatory measures that says, once a policy says this is what needs to be done, somebody must monitor, somebody must follow up, and there must be some kind of enforcement from whichever level. I do not know as to whether our multilateral platforms like the UN Women or any other platform that deals with that, working with the grassroots organizations and all the NGOs on women. Is there any way that we can enforce some of the legislative imperatives? Because policies are there, legislation is there that talks to how women can benefit and how they can develop and how we can make sure that they participate and they are empowered in the field of water and sanitation. But that sits in the books and no one follows up, no one implements, no one makes sure that there's some kind of enforcement.
I fear I have to agree with you, Nishedi. I do think that basically everything we need when it comes to at least to global policies and to international treaties is there. But nobody is putting the finger on saying, and what the hell are you doing to implement it? At least not enough. And you know, there's discussions within the UN about new mechanisms. There's discussion between in the CSW on new mechanisms, and maybe, you know, one part of the discussion should be, how do we talk to governments that signed up for all these international treaties to make sure that it's in their national policies, in their national budget, and we could do much more on that. We have to be more clever on that, but that means that we need all kinds of organizations to help us to monitor, that we might really do need citizens' data, because what the statistical offices are doing is not showing that. So we need the women and the men on the ground to actually say, okay, we know that there is this national policy, we know that there is this global policy, but we don't see it. So help us out here and yeah, explain to us how this is implemented on the ground. And scientists can actually help with that. You know, they can actually research how much of a national policy is actually being implemented on the ground, how much of knowledge is there for international treaties, all this kind of things, and then knowing how to respond, how to implement what is there.
Can come
well,
in,
let's go on.
if I can just come in to maybe just sweep on that one. You know, Lisha, when I did my presentation, you were not in, but then what I said is that I do not think a lot of problems are at policy level and whatever. Maybe also we need to understand as women organizations and women activists, actually who or at which door should we put this question? Who should be doing this? Is it UN Women? Is it our own governments, presidents' offices? Is it parliaments that must monitor and enforce? Because talking to ourselves, we know what needs to be done, we know what is not done, we know what is there to be done, but who is there to ensure that this is done? Who can carry the blame if it's not done? Until we know where to point the finger or where to put the hand on the person who should be doing that. It is not enough to have policies, but no one takes responsibility for that, because officials at implementing level can just see that policy and not do anything about it. They go ahead and do their daily work and don't worry about what actually comes in. When I listed the objectives of the water sector, according to our legislation, all that is in there can cater for women. It's enough for us to participate, benefit, and do everything, but who takes responsibility that is done?
Ah, Nishadi, I love you. But it's you know, part of it, of course, is that we don't have enough people, for instance, in Parliament, that are actually taking this seriously. I mean, you and I both know that if you ask people in country, what are your priorities, they will say, oh, water is a priority, and women are a priority, and gender is a priority. And then you look at the negotiations with the donors, and all three of those are not in there. So somewhere between the capitals and the negotiators, it gets lost. So maybe there's something we need to do to actually educate the negotiators. I think another one is that in some cases we have to say, UN women, stop being polite. Just say what's not being done and how you would like to discuss it, and make sure that people are going to do it. There's loads of stuff that we can actually do, but it also means that we need a lot of support to get our foot in the door, to be heard from women like you and Helen in her region, and from Kusum in her region. Yeah, to actually make the women more brave and say, hello, this is not good enough. We know you wrote this down, but you put it in a drawer and you're not doing anything with it.
You know, I think that's a pretty strong statement, and I think it's a pretty accurate statement, and maybe a good note for us to go out on. Here it is, 4:30. I know we didn't get to a lot of your questions, so to the best of our ability, I'll send these questions to our panelists, and then if they have time, I'll ask them to write a short response writing, and then we'll post it to our website at www.iwra.org, along with a recording of this webinar and copies of all the PowerPoint presentations. It should be up in a few days, although give our panelists a bit of time to respond, because your questions were quite numerous, but quite good as well. So I'd again like to thank my panel. So a big thank you to Kusum Athakurla, Chair of the Network of Women's Professionals, Helen Natsu, Regional Manager at the Nile Basin Discourse, Marup Ncheti, Chief Director for the Global Cooperation, the Department of Water and Sanitation in South Africa, and Alicia Whitmere, Executive Director, Women for Water. So I'm reminding some of our panel and IWRA itself, we're all on Twitter or other social media. So go ahead and look them up and follow them and engage with them on social media if you're interested. And if these presentations left you interested in learning more, you can go to our LinkedIn webpage and continue the discussion, follow us, and get more updates from IWRA. I really hope that everyone in the audience here today found the insights provided by our panel in a special event to be really helpful and to give you a lot of material to think about in the coming days. And it's going to help you get your own work moving forward, whether or not that's practitioner-based, whether or not it's academic-based. So to remind you again, this webinar is brought to you by the International Water Resources Association. We're an almost 50-year-old nonprofit, non-governmental educational organization, and we focus on bridging disciplines and geographies and connecting professionals, students, individuals, corporations, institutions, everyone who's concerned with the sustainable use of the world's water resources. So if you're interested in knowing more about the association or becoming a member, please go to www.iwra.org. On behalf of the whole IWRA office, we thank you very much for tuning into the webinar. So thank you very much, and thank you very much to my panel. It was a really wonderful event today. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you, my dear friends online, and thank you all the people I couldn't see that were online, and we hope to connect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and thank you for the presentation. Great information that you shared.
Thank you.
Thank
It
you.
was like coming out party out of lockdown.
Thank you so much. Thank
We
you.
are all on it. We are all on it, and thank you so much on behalf of my department and the lady responsible for gender in the department, Puti Sitati, is really excited to hear these presentations. She's busy fighting the war this side on behalf of women. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Have a great day, guys.
Bye-bye all.
Bye.
Bye.